Let's see. So this is the beginning of our second lecture, and our second lecture is going to be about static pages and routing. But first off, just for people that weren't here on the first week, that if you have not been added to the Piazza, please come to me after class and let me add you, because it's we'll do most of our announcements through Piazza. And for those who are on Piazza, has everyone seen the important notes post? Because that's where, if you need any kind of like quick information, you could find our webcast, our slides, and the homework. Quick poll, who is finished with the first homework assignment? All right, a good amount of you. How many people haven't started? All right, another good amount of you. Okay, that's totally fine. I mean, we have office hours across the week if you need help. And just in case you did not know, that homeworks are always due the following Friday at 11:59 p.m., which means the homework that comes out today, it's already posted on the website and it's already updated on the important notes slide, isn't due this Friday, but rather 1 week plus about 3 more days. Okay, so before I get into this part of the lecture, how many people have successfully installed Rails, went through the whole thing, and when you created that new application and ran Rails servers, that you got the correct screen? Okay, a good amount of you. That's actually better than I hoped. Usually people have a lot of problems installing, but it seems like it's gotten better over the last few years. So yeah, if you still have a lot of trouble installing your Rails application, Rails into your computer, just come by in office hours and we'll do our best to help you. You can try to post on Piazza and we'll try our best to debug it, but it's just generally easier to fix these things in person. So the first thing we're gonna go over is Rails command. So when you install Rails, you have a command now in your terminal called Rails. And the first command we're going to learn is Rails new. And what that does is it creates a new Rails application for you, and it'll automatically generate a bunch of files and dependencies and install a lot of things. And I'll code along the way while doing this. So to start a Rails application, I'm going to go to my terminal, hide this. People in the back see the text editor. Okay. This closer to my mouth. All right. So to do this, to start a new Rails application, I type Rails new, and then I have to think about what the name of my application is, and I'm going to say test application, just because this is what I'm going to go with. And bam. What this command does is it creates a folder, and within this folder it creates a bunch of files that are all part of a web application. For this class, you won't touch a lot of these files, but we'll go over the main ones that are important for making your basic web application. So you could just ignore the rest of the output and see that in my folder that I have a new directory called test application, which I'm going to change into. And right here is the structure of a Rails application, all these files. I'm going to go back to my slide and talk about the application structure. So at the top level, there are 4 files we're probably going to work with in this class. Or not files, folders rather, the app folder. I'll also open with the text editor all these files, and hopefully it'll pop up soon. But within the app folder, it contains all the files that are part of our MVC, which, if you remember from last week, are your models, your views, and your controllers, which are ways to interact with the data you store. The for models to interact with the data you store, controllers, which handle requests browsers make, and views, which tells the browser what HTML to send back. Do we have any questions so far? All right. The other part of a Rails application is the DB file. We're not going to worry about it this week. It will come in the future when we get into data storage. But the DB file will contain all the configurations needed to set up a database. We have the config file, which does your Rails configuration. But the most important file within this directory is your routes. I'm going to take this out. So back to the top level of our application, which is our test application. If we go into config, this contains a bunch of folders and files that are small configurations for a Rails application. But the most important file we're going to worry about today is routes.rb. And we will talk about more details about this file later. And finally, at the top level of the app structure is your gem file. Your gem file, which I will open up. It's also at the top level, is a list of all the dependencies your application has. So I'm just going to make this bigger. If you could see from the back that we list all these gems like Rails, SQLite, Sass Rails, Uglify. These are all dependencies a Rails application needs to install before it works. And later in this class, what we'll do is use different gems or libraries to gain additional functionality. Do we have any questions? All right. Another Rails command that you want to, the second Rails command you'll learn after Rails new is Rails console. And what Rails console does is it opens up your Rails application without the views. And for now, this will just work exactly like a Ruby interpreter. So I could just do 2 + 2, 1, get 3, define foo, make it puts 5, and end the function. And if I call foo, it'll print out 5 and return me nothing. So right now, if you did the homework, you use IRB to open interpreter. In the future, you'll probably be using the command Rails console to test out your Ruby code and to help debug your web application. Right, and to exit from your interpreter, you just type the word exit, and you're out. Okay, this is just more details about the Rails console. It's just what I said. It runs your application without the views. And you could look at requests, which are the basic ways a web browser communicates with the web application. And we'll get into more details when we start the real live coding session. And finally, something you ran at the bottom of the instructions for installing a Rails application is Rails server. And what it does is it starts an application locally. So first off, if I go to localhost 3000, I'll turn that off. Localhost 3000, there's nothing. This web page is not available because there's nothing on my localhost 3000. To put something on my localhost 3000, all I have to do is type Rails server. And right now, my computer will spin up a process, which is our web application on localhost 3000. And right here, if I refresh this, I get a web page back. This is actually a web application working and sending back HTML and CSS to my web browser from my computer. And if you look at our logs right here, before, this was the bottom of my screen, right? But when I made the request, or when I went to localhost 3000, my server got a request, and it just printed it out for me to give me more information about that request and like what it returned back. If I'm going too fast or anything's confusing, please let me know. So do we have any questions? All right. Some Ruby things to reiterate on from last week, just to make sure they stick. I am going to go to a file that I prepared for this lecture right here called lecture 2. And just some things I want to go over is classes in Ruby. So when I open my Ruby interpreter, I just type IRB, opens the Ruby interpreter, right? Let's say I want to load a file. You don't ever need to, you probably will not need to ever load a file in this class, so you don't really have to learn about this. But I'm going to say I want to load science.rb. And it returns true because it says it's found the file and it ran the code in it. And in a separate tab, I'm going to open up science.rb. Yeah. Okay. 2 things I want to go over that are, let's see, whoops. That are part of your homework that I've touched upon last week, but I want to make sure it sticks so that you'll have an easier time doing it, is the idea of classes, instance variables, and options. So first of all, I defined a class called science, right? And I defined a method called initialize. And it takes in 1 argument. I type in as arg1. And what I do is store arg1 in a variable called @type. So does anyone remember why, what is special about putting an @ symbol in front of a variable in the initialize method? Oh, who said that? Okay, yeah, that's exactly right. It is an instance variable, which means when you create an instance of this science class, it will actually get stored and saved. Does anyone remember what method I should call on a class to create an instance of a class? Yeah, I heard it around new. Exactly. So I'm going to go here in my interpreter and say s equals science.new. And in my initialize method, I said it takes in 1 argument. And I'm going to make that argument math. Okay, so now S is this new instance of a science class, and its @type right now should be math. So I defined this method called type, and within the method, I only put the word @type, and I ended it. What do you think will happen if I do s.type? Oh, crap, I hit enter. My bad, but outcome, it prints out the type, because what it'll do is access its own @type instance variable and print it out. Can you repeat that? Yeah, it returns the string. Yes, that's what I meant. Thank you. Okay. And the third thing is options. Has anyone ever worked with options in like Python before or no? No. Okay. So basically, when you define a method in Ruby, I just put in a list of arguments. I put in A, B, but this third argument, I put options, right? I put equals this open parenthesis, open curly bracket, close curly bracket. What I'm saying here is that you'll have to pass me A and B and possibly a third option. But if you don't pass me a third option, I'll instantiate an empty hash map. So just to show this, I could do s dot, name of the method is cool type, right? And the main part of this that I want you to care about is the fact that it either puts B @type and then A, or A @type then B. So if I do s.cool underscore type, and only pass in 2 options, right? I'm gonna make them strings. Hard math, let's say hard math. We'll put in the strings hard and class, right? I did not give it a 3rd option. The method still runs and prints hard math class because the 3rd argument will automatically become an empty hash map. I'll look in the hash map to see if it has the key reverse. And since it's an empty hash map, it doesn't have that key. And so the value that gets returned is null. So I go into the else case where I print out A first, then the type, which I stored as math, and then I print out B, which was my 2nd argument. Do we have any questions so far? Or do you want me to get into the how to use the options part? So the useful thing about this is, let's say I want to reverse the string, right? And the person that defined the method wants to give me the option to reverse a string, and they put in, so that if I put in the key, if I put in a hash map that with the key reverse and the output of the key is a true value, that it'll print the reverse of the string. So what I could do is s.cool type, and for the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to use poetry mode that I talked about last week and just put the parentheses all in here. So I'm going to put hard class and the key value pair reverse true. So when I do this, I put it in true for my reverse option. In my code, I look up my options, look up the key reverse, I get the value true. So instead of printing hard math class, I get the reverse of it, which is class math hard. And the reason I want to talk about this options hash in poetry mode is that it looks like you'll see this a lot in Rails code, that you won't get the parentheses, which is what I did earlier. But to start an options hash, all you have to do is just put the key, colon, and then the value. And if I want to pass in multiple options, I could just keep on putting another option. Let's say extra is 1. And that's valid. Because what this does is it actually creates this hash map. Or this is it in non-poetry mode. I get hard class, but this whole hash map contains 2 key value pairs. And since I never look for the key value extra, I don't do anything with it. But if I want to, I could say if extra, if options extra equals 1, I'm going to just return the string extra, or else I'll return the string not extra. And I'll reload the file. Oh, let's reload the interpreter. IRB load /science.rb s equals science.new. Cancel science.new. I can just pass in, I'm gonna pass in math again. If we do s.cool, let's see if I can find an old one. But if I do s.cool type hard class reverse extra, and I pass in 1, I'll just print out the word extra. But if I change this option to 2, I should get exactly not extra. And that is Rails options, which will be useful for your homework. Questions? Is there anything you want me to repeat or Yes.
Wait, didn't you check reverse first? Reverse wanted the-
Yes, I did check reverse first, so I'm just gonna open up that science code again. So I did check reverse, right? And then I ran this code, but I never returned any, or the code didn't stop here, right? It stopped at this, and since Rails only returns the last thing evaluated, it doesn't do anything with the reverse. What I can do to make it show both is do something like puts here, so it'll print out the string. Here, will print out the string. I could save that. It's going to reload everything. So load ./science.rb and s equals science.new. I'm gonna make it computer science. So then when I do s.cool type with hardened class, reverse is false. I'll print out the non-reverse string, and since my extra was 2, I put not extra. But I could print out the same first string and change the second string by changing the second option. So we'll print extra. And finally, I could just turn reverse true and get the reverse string and the extra string. Questions? Yeah. We try to give it something that's not a hash. So you'll pass it in, you'll overwrite options with whatever you give it. But when we try to make a key access, it might break. So, I mean, I'm gonna say it probably breaks. So if I pass it 2, and no implicit conversion of symbol into integer in science 13. So yeah, it did error out. And if we look at science 13, blah, 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 yeah. So basically, what it did was it tried to fetch this like a key from an integer, and it just pooped. Any more questions? All right. Moving on. Okay, this is just the slides for it, but this is all the things I just went over. In case you want to check out the syntax again, you could just look up the slides, and they are on the Piazza post. Okay, back to routing and static pages. So this is where we actually start getting into web development. So how many people know what an HTTP request is? Okay, a portion of you. So for you guys, this is repeated information, but an HTTP request is basically how we communicate on the internet. And what your browser does every time you go to like facebook.com or you click like submit this form button is that your browser is making an HTTP request, which sends data to a specific location. An HTTP request consists of 3 parts: a verb, a path, and data. I'm going to start with a path first because we'll get into verbs later. But a path is basically the location. So when I go to, for example, railsdecal.com, right? And I go to /admin/dashboard. None of you can see this, but like through your guys' accounts. But we have the first part, which is www.railsdecal.com, which is what we call a host name. And everything after is our path. Every time we make a request to, every time we make an HTTP request, we will get the path information along with the request. Data is basically every time you make a request, you could pass on additional data to it that you don't see in the URL. You could pass that through the URL, but you could also pass additional data packets that aren't seen. It's what your browser does every time. Like when you go to facebook.com, you're gonna send in like your cookies and stuff to make so Facebook could tell if you're already logged in or not. And this comes in your request. And what I'm going to get to now are verbs. Verbs are basically telling the web application what kind of request this is. Like, what are you trying to do with this request? And there are 4 common requests that we're going to cover in this class. They are get, post, put, and patch. We kind of jumble those together, and delete. And I'll go over each one. So first, we have a get request. Where every time you make an HTTP GET request, you're telling the web application, I want to retrieve information about a resource. Like, I want to retrieve information about a user, or I want to retrieve information about an item in your store. The things about GET requests that's extra knowledge is you could have the information cached. So what the response you get comes back. So let's say you go to a website, right, and you make a GET request. It could be cached, and what that means is next time you go to that exact link, your web browser doesn't really need to load it, but rather just loads a local copy. Another thing to note is limited data can be sent. So the only way a GET request could send data is through the URL. And since a URL has a limit of like 2,000 characters, it prevents too much data from being sent through URL, and therefore too much data from being sent in a GET request. Since we're doing static pages today, most of our lecture is going to be focused around a GET request. A post request is used to create a resource. What that means is every time I go to a website, and let's say I'm on Neopets, right, and I want to create an account. When I submit all my account information, what I should be sending is a post request, because I'm telling the web application for Neopets that I'm trying to create a resource. And with a post request, you could send data along with the request that's not in the URL. And those are probably the big points about the post request. A put and also a patch request is telling the web server that this request is asking to modify a resource. So basically, I make my Neopets account, I messed up my birthday, and I want to change it. When I fill out the form to say, oh, update my birthday information and hit the button, I'm going to send I most likely will send a put or patch request. In most ways, it's similar to a post. The only difference is a post, since your resource is not created yet, it doesn't exist yet, you can't specify it, versus the puts and patch, since you're trying to update a resource, you could actually specify that resource. Finally, we have a delete request, and that's saying delete this information. For example, going back to Neopets, let's say I feel like I'm a little too old to play this game and I want to delete my account. And there's a button that says, oh, delete this account. If I click it, most likely it will send a delete request. Do we have any questions about HTTP requests or the verbs or differences of the verbs or anything I just covered? All right, let's have a small quiz. So basically, let's say I go to Facebook's homepage. I go to facebook.com, right? On my web browser, I type facebook.com, press enter. What request is it most likely making? And to do this quiz, what I want you to do on the count of 3 is just raise your hand and put up the numbers 1, 2, 3, or 4, where each, it matches with the assigned answer. So I just want to think about it for 10 seconds. Can I get people to raise their hands or fists? Hopefully more of you. All right, on the count of 3, just put up a number of fingers you think is the answer. 1, 2, 3. Okay, everybody, talk with your neighbor of why you think you got whatever you got. Let's spend like a minute or 30 seconds. right, can I get your attention back? All right. Everyone put your fists up, and on count of 3, if your answer, even if your answer didn't change, just put up what answer you think it is right now. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I see a lot of ones. I saw 5. But yeah, almost everyone seemed to guess 1, and 1 is the correct answer. So basically, when you go to Facebook, what you're trying to ask for is, I just want to retrieve information. I'm not trying to update any of my own information or anything like that. So I'll make a GET request. All right, let's say you're on your Facebook profile, right? And you realize that, or you legally change your name and you want to change your name on Facebook. And now you fill in the box and you click submit or update information. What requests do you think you're sending? Okay, same thing. Just put your fist up, and on the count of 3, just put up the what you think it is. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I see 3s, and I see some 2s. I see some 4s. What I want you to do is same thing. Just talk to your neighbor of why you think it's what you think. All right, can I get everybody's attention again? So same drill. On the count of 3, just put up what you think the answer is. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I see a lot of 3s, and mostly everyone converged on 3s. There's still some 2s I see, but the answer is 3. It should be a patch request or a put request. And why that is because the name already exists on the server. That resource is there, your user, right, is already there, but what you want to do is just update information on there. So your request should be like a put or patch request. And final question, you want to write a post on Facebook. What kind of request do you want to make? Everybody, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, trick question. Why is it not a post request? No, I'm just lying to you. You all got it right. Yes, it is a post request. Okay, so I'll start coding beginning real soon. But basically today in this MVC picture that we are going to start a web browser. We're going to make a request. Our router is going to parse the request. We're going to have a controller that reads the information from this request. We're going to skip all the model and database stuff since we're making static pages. And we're going to get our view, render our view back in our browser. So let's start with making a new Rails application. I'm going to do Rails new live. So I'm going to create a new Rails application right here. And I'll just, while it's doing that, I'm going to talk about what the routes.rb file is. So basically, a routes.rb file is what your router is. You define, when you get a request, which controller method or action you want to run. The syntax I put at the bottom is basically, you put your HTTP verb, pass it a string, which is the path you want to match, and finally an option called to that lists the controller name, a hashtag, and an action. Okay, if that doesn't make sense, hopefully the example will make everything better. So I'm going to cd to live, right? And when I do Rails S, I start, I'm going to exit this one. Create a copy right here. Okay, so when I do Rails S, I started my web server. I go to localhost, sorry, 3000, right? This is our basic Rails application. There's nothing interesting in it, right? Now let's say I want to create a home page. And I want it to be at the URL localhost 3000/home. If I go here, what do you think will happen? All right, so basically, first things first, every time I make a request, right, it's gonna go to my router. You never saw me touch the routes.rb file. So right now my Rails is telling me the error, oh, there is no match to a GET request. Since I'm typing something in my browser and just pressing enter, it's a GET request to my /home. So this what I'm going to do is define that. Right here in my routes.rb file, there's a bunch of it gives you comments of how to use the file, but I'm going to take that out. Every time you create a new Rails application, you'll see that in there. And on your homework, the comments are still there, which should provide insight in case you ever get lost. But to follow my syntax I was talking about earlier, first, I know it's what type of request. I heard someone mumble it, but GET, it's a GET request because I was just trying to press enter to /home. Next, I want to match the path. My path would be /home because that's where I wanted it to go. Okay. I've told it a verb and a path to match. Right now, when I rerun it, I'll get something, oh, whoops. Should restart this. 5. Oh, this is the wrong one. Whoops. The wrong app. So your routes is in your config folder, in case you didn't know, and I could just do get /home. So basically, on my routes.rb, I've defined something at least. I'm not saying this is working yet. I've defined something. I'm saying match me a get request to /home, or a get request to /home. And when I run this, I get an argument error. And the reason is right now, we've found a matching request, right? But it doesn't know, I never told my router which controller to send it to or any information like that. And now what I'm going to do is make a controller. Does anybody remember where the controller lives? Which folder? App, I heard app, good. That's exactly right. So our controllers live in app. So if you go to app/controllers, this will list all our controllers. We don't have any personally defined ones yet. We just have our base application controller. So normally what most people would do is start writing a file to inherit from action controller base. But Rails is really nice. It has this magic for you called generators. And what generators do is it's a command line tool that when you pass it in a name, a type of file to make, and some extra arguments, it'll create files for you. So I'm going to show you how Rails can easily create a controller. I'm going to just actually clear that. So Rails, put a space there. Rails G stands for Rails generate, right? So this is a command you'll use often. Rails generate. I want to generate a controller, so my next argument is controller, right? Following that, I want to give it the name of the controller. Since this lecture is about static pages, I'm just going to create one controller for all our work, and it's going to be the static pages controller. Static pages. And right here, I have enough to minimally make a controller. But Rails has extra magic that if I pass in additional arguments, I could create methods on top of that are already seated in this controller. So I want to make something called a home method. Put home, and once I press enter, oh, that's embarrassing. Blah, 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 blah. Rails check part missing action. Oh. Okay, for now this error is actually blocking me, but I'll do this. Rails G controller, static pages controller. Okay, so it will list all the files it generates. The important ones I'll go at one at a time is app/controllers/static pages controller. So if you remember, my controller folder only had application controller, but my Rails generator actually generated my static pages controller. It does all the kind of boring stuff, like it inherits from application controller, but also it defined home for me. I know this only seems like 4 lines right now, but generators become really useful when you're just trying to create larger files, and it's done more than just make this file. You see, if you remember, I actually deleted a route from my a route from my routes.rb file, but it actually pre-populated a route that will work for this controller. But I generally don't like the syntax it does it, so I'm going to just take that out and then re-put a get. Wait, let's see. And change this part. I'm just going to make a get home, right? Two. This is syntax that you can find on the slide. The first thing in your to option is to put 1, the name of the controller, and 2, the action you want to run. So what was the name of my controller? Yeah, static pages. So all I have to do is put static_pages. And first of all, a common thing people always do at the beginning is put static pages controller, or they take out the underscores. Don't do that. So Rails will make a bunch of assumptions for you, right? Since they know you always are routing to a controller, you don't need to put the word controller under all of them. It'll just know to append _controller on it. So basically, it'll match this file, our static_pages_controller, but you don't have to put the word controller in it. And next, we always follow our name of a controller by a hashtag, right? And finally, the name of the action we want to run. So right now, our routes.rb says, if I get a GET request to a path/home, what I want my web application to do is go to static_pages controller and run the home action. And let's see what happens now. When I have localhost 3000, I press enter, and bam, I actually have a web page now. How can anyone guess how this? Like, I did not write this. I did not write static pages #home, find me and whatever. When did this get there? Can anyone take a guess? Yes. Yes, exactly. When I created the controller. So when I ran Rails generate and I put like the name of the control and the methods, right? And you could see it right here. What it also did was create views for me. So it actually created a view called static pages/home/html.erb, which I'll pull up right here. So our views folder, like the rest of the MVC model, is in our app folder. I'll open it. Layout is our default layouts, but you don't have to worry about that for now. What we have to worry about is static pages. So when we created this controller through Rails, it automatically created an associated folder for the controller, which is, since we had a static pages controller, it actually created a static pages folder within the views. And also note that Rails created home.html.erb for us. So what it did was it looked at the name of the methods that we wanted to add and created those html.erb files. So if we look at this home.html.erb file, we could see all the stuff that was printed on a Rails application. So that means if I edit this HTML in here, right, and to say hi class, save it, and I rerun this, that's the view that appears. So basically, I was able to create a web page that you could go to, all by just running one line of Rails. Like, I just basically pretty much only ran like Rails G whatever, and I changed one line to HTML, and I got this. What are your questions? There's bound to be questions because I just did a lot with so little, but the questions will pop up. So can anyone tell me how this controller knows how to render that view? Yes. So yes, layouts has information about setting up, like, if people know front end, they know it puts information like, oh, head, like UTF, whatever, and like load this JavaScript. But I'm talking about how does this controller know to pick like home.html.erb to render? And the thing is, it only knows by matching the name of the method to the name of the file. That's the only way it knows. So therefore, if I rename this file from home to just HOM, right? Change the file name, right? When I do this, it says template is missing. And it's because the function we ran, right? When I make this request to go to localhost 3000/home, and we match it to our controller's home method, we did not specify any view, and it made the assumption that our view will match the name of the action. But since it didn't, we were unable to find the template, or we were unable to find the HTML to send back. So a thing that you won't do much in this for this class, but for the sake of your knowledge, is that in case you want to tell the controller to render a view that doesn't match the name of the method, all you have to do is put in the word render and the name of the file. So instead of home, it's just HOM. So I'll just do render HOM. I'm manually telling this controller to don't find the file with your name, but rather find the file HOM. And that's how it renders this page. What are your questions? Okay. So basically, I've just described to you a way to create pages that don't change, because this has HTML, CSS that is static, right? But let's say I want to do something like, in my controller, that is where I have access to models, right? And I have access to Ruby code. If I want to kind of put variables from my controller into my view, I have to use something called embedded Ruby. So let's say if I had my full Rails application, right, and I wanted to print out a variable inside my controller. Like, let's say I wanted the word hi, right? What I can do is create an instance variable within my controller. So I create an instance variable at text, and instance variables are defined by the fact that they have an at variable in front of them. That when I do at text equals hi, I've assigned it to I've assigned at text to the string hi, and now my view can actually access it. And for the sake of just not calling render, I'm going to rename the file back to HOME. So if I want to print out information from my controller onto a view, all I have to do is put %sign equals to open like Ruby code, and to close Ruby code, I'll just put a %sign greater than sign. So first, I can evaluate Ruby code like this: 5 plus 5. And if I refresh this, it does Ruby logic, so it gives me 10. But I don't want to do like hard-coded logic in my view. Let's say in my controller, after you learn how to make database accesses, right, and I get like the name of user, I want to put that in there. How do I do it? I just put the %sign equals, and I do at text. And what I'll print out on this page is the value of at text in the home controller. I mean, in the static pages controller's home action. So I refresh, and now I get whatever the valuation of that variable is. What are your questions? You will get a lot of practice doing this because this is where the dynamic part comes in on your views. That you'll have to access values that you calculate in your controller to find this information or to print it out on the page. So right now, everything's hard-coded, right? But what if I wanted to make information that I pass it not from within the code, but from outside to show up? So within your controller, right? Your controller handles requests. And as I told, and as like a lecture slide said, when you make requests, you could attach additional data to it. And the way to access this data is with something called params. Okay. I'm going to do something, and I'm going to explain it later, but I'm going to do at params text. Okay. Right now, I'm going to say that, and you don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to say that you have something called a params hash that's automatically defined in your controller, and that there's a key called text in it. And what I'm doing is assigning at text to that params value. Okay. So when I go home, nothing appears because I've never passed it any data. And the way you can look at all the data that gets passed in a request is by going to your Rails server. You remember the part of the terminal that you ran Rails server on? And every time you make a request, it'll print a new log. So I'm going to highlight this part right here. So when I press enter on my browser to go to /home, I started get request to /home, right? Rails tells me that information. Next, it tells me which controller processes it and which action it used, right? Let's try adding data in the URL. Has anyone ever added data through a URL before? Yes. Do you want to explain how it works or not really?
So after the question like keyword, you can define key values.
So exactly. I don't. We're not going to use param values or sorry URL params much in this class, but just for the sake of showing you how params work in the URL, I'm just going to do a question mark u equals 1. And if I go to my request, so my original request looked like this: start get /home, right? For whatever call static pages controller. But I made 2 requests, so let's just look at the bottom one. I made a start get /home question mark u equals 1. So what I did, what my Rails controller or my Rails router figured out still was that anything past the question mark, I'm just going to ignore and put it in my data. But so then basically, I'm still going to parse /home, and I'll match it correctly with the static pages controller's home action. But here's extra information now. I have something called parameters, and inside is a key value pair from u to 1. I can make another request from a equals 2. And when I look at my Rails server, it'll tell me my parameters. I have a that maps to 2. How is this useful? As I said earlier, we could actually access these parameters in our controller. And it's found in something called our params hash. And what I'm doing right now is setting whatever the key text is to the at text variable, which should be printed out on our page. So it means if I create a URL variable called text and say 5, this is what it actually did. You see how right at the bottom of our page, I now have 5. So I could actually send data to the URL and tell my web application to print out different things. Do we have any questions about that? Yes.
What does the syntax look like for adding multiple parameters?
For adding multiple parameters, I believe it's just you put in ampersands, right? And you say, I'm going to put something like age equals 5. And right here, if you look in our params hash, right, you see that I get text with high class and age with the string 5. And that's how you add multiple parameters. So I could access the second one right here and say at age equals params, access the age param, right? And here's something interesting I could do. I could actually write if-else statements in my view. So if I do if at age equals the string 5, because basically all your params won't be default integers, they'll actually be defaulted as strings. That's just a heads up, because they can't assume that you're always going to put an integer in a param. But I could just put this, if age is equivalent to 5, I'll print my text, right? Else, in my view, I will print out what should I print out? The string not 5. Okay, and I will end this. Whoops, cancel, save. So if the parameter I pass to age is equivalent to the string 5, I'll print my normal text. Also, I'll print not 5. So if I refresh this, since my age is 5, I get back the normal string. But let's say I pass in a different data, and when I set age is not 5, I'll print out not 5. Okay. An important thing to note, this is also in the slides if you want to look at slides after, is the fact that there's two different kind of ways to embed Ruby. One is to do the % without the equals, and the other way is to do a % with the equals. The difference is that without the equal sign, you won't print it. And that means you're only using it for flow control, like if, else, or like for each do. Only Ruby code that has a % sign in front of it will actually print to your HTML. Yes?
So you have to have the angle bracket and percentage on every line?
Yeah. Okay. What are your questions? Yeah.
Wait, you just said if you have a percent sign, you mean the equal sign?
Yes, sorry. If I said % sign, I mean you have to have an equal sign after the % sign for it to be printed on the page. Okay. Okay, so let's go define another page. Okay. Let's say I want to create a method, right? Let's see. So I'm actually going to go through the slides so you know the locations of all the things. Let's say I want to create a page that I want to show up only with a post request. So basically, I'm going to define a method called hi. And right here, I'm just going to, I'm not going to change anything about hi yet. How do I make a view that's associated with hi? I heard generate it. You could totally generate it. And when you generate it, what it will do is create in your static, since it's in the static pages controller, I'll go to my views, static pages, and just create an associated hi.html.brb with it. And in this, I'm going to say hi new page. Okay. What I'm going to now do is create a route for it. Normally, like in any sense of this, right now, it should be a GET request. But just to make an example to show you how posts work, I'm going to make this a post request. So I'm going to tell my router, if I get a post /hi, what I want you to do is go to my static pages controller and run the hi method. Okay. I go to my localhost 3000, and if I press hi, what do you think will happen? Or if I type in hi and press enter, what do you think will happen? Error. Someone said error, and yes. And the reason it errors is because I told the router to only match a post request. But whenever I type in a URL and just press enter, I will be making a GET request. So it cannot find a route matching a GET to a /hi. So I will have to make a post request to /hi. Now, here's something interesting I will do to our so-called home page. I'm going to use embedded Ruby to create a link. And within your views, you can look up the documentation for this. You will have a method called link to, and it's really common to use. It takes at minimum 2 arguments. And that is one, the title of the link. Like I'm going to say the title of the link is hi. And the second one is like the URL or path. So I'm going to do https://google.com. I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back to home. Now I have this link right here. If I click it, I go to google.com. But I don't want to route outside of my website. I want to route into my website. So what I want to do is pass a link to go to /hi. And if I refresh this and hit this, I'll go to /hi. I didn't fix the routing error because I'm still making a GET request. But you see, that's how I can just pass in strings, and this Rails will generate me the correct link to go to. Now, there's another way instead of passing straight strings into this, is that Rails will also define methods based off your routes to RB. So every time you put a line in here, you actually also define a variable for you to use in your views to kind of map to these places. And the way you can look at all the variables that are generated by your routes is running a command called rake routes. Let's see if I could actually make it fit on one line. Okay, run rake routes, press enter, and then bam, I get these 2 routes. They'll tell me like all about what the prefix is, what verb it matches, which controller, which action. But the important part is the prefix. In the end, I want to go to static pages hi, and it says the prefix is hi. And to create a link that goes to that route, instead of typing out the exact string of /hi, I could just do the name of the prefix and append underscore path to it. And right now, if I refresh this, I will get the same thing, where if I click on this, I should go to /hi, but it'll error out because I'm still making a GET request. So it seems like the main part of our problem is we're just not doing the correct verb. How do we change the HTTP verb? All you have to do is pass in an option, what we were talking about earlier, and just say method. And put in the symbol post. I refresh this, and I hit hi, and there we go. I've changed the verb to a post, so when I click on the link, it sends a post request instead of a GET request. And when it receives, my router could recognize a post request to /hi, and it'll generate that page for me. What are your questions? I feel like that was a lot of information. at once.
Could you go back to where you
Wrote the method. Yeah. So something that you'll find on the homework is link first argument is like the label or the string on the front end. The second is a path. You can either hand in a manual string, but for this homework, you'll find that that you'll want to know about how to use a path. And to check your paths, remember rake routes. That will be your friend. And another useful piece of information is if you want to manually switch a route to, like let's say you want the URL to be /hi, but you think hi_path is really ugly. You want to change it to something else. Let's say you want to change it to by, make the prefix by. All you have to do is pass in a second option, as, and you put by. Save it. I'll run rake routes again. Oh, I misspelled routes. Rake routes. And now you see, even though a post to hi goes to static pages hi, I changed the prefix from hi to by. And that's because of the as option. So when I go here back to home, right here, it won't work because now the hi path is no longer defined because I switched the prefix. So the way I switch it back is with by. Can I refresh? Let's see. That is not where no, that's not what I wanted to change. I wanted to change by in this home.html because the by path method will generate the correct string for me. And when I refresh, it will work. Hit hi, go new page. What are your questions? Useful bit of information. Right now, we have what I said was our home page right here is not our actual home page because when we go to localhost 3000, our root, we get this. And let's say on our real website, we never want to see this because this is not, our app, it should not just be that. To make your root path into a controller method, all you have to do is just say root static pages #home. So when I go to root URL or localhost 3000, I'll go to my static pages controller, run my home action, it'll figure out which view to send, and bam. Instead of doing /home to get to this page, I just didn't have to append anything, and it just figured out which controller. I told it which controller to call, the static pages controller, and I told it which action to run, which was the home action. Any questions on that? Yes.
Why was I doing the get method before and not the post? You were saying how it was like getting those.
Yeah. So basically, all links will default to get. It's just the default option because you always have to have a verb to HTTP request. But when you have a link, it'll always default to get. And post is the default when submitting a form. So I have not shown you how to make a form yet. And but you will have a form. So on your homework, which you don't need to know how the form really works, but you'll have a form there. And when you click the submit button, it'll try to attempt to make a post request. And more info I said early in this lecture that will be really useful for your homework is the idea of params. And remember how earlier I was passing params through the URL like $u = 5, right? And I get in my request this parameters hash. This will be really useful for your homework. And the reason is you'll later in your homework, you'll encounter making a form, right? And every time you submit the form, it'll make a request with some key value pairs. To find out how to answer one of the questions, you will have to inspect your request, look at the key value pairs, and figure out where to grab it from the params. It's a little involved for a homework assignment, but routing is probably one of the hardest things to understand in Rails, I think. Like, the hard part, this is like one of the harder parts, so if you feel like this is a little bit overwhelming, it's okay. It's a lot to take in, especially at the beginning. And yeah, it comes with practice, and it gets easier from here. And the thing is, the only reason it's put at the beginning is because with a Rails application, if you can't route anywhere, all you have is a home page, which isn't too useful. So yeah, it's just it's a core thing that's just kind of difficult to understand or get used to. That is my lecture. The homework is already posted on the Piazza on the important slides page, or you could always access it on assignments. We'll take a quick break for now, and yeah, you guys could chat and whatnot. All right, I'm gonna release the check-in code right now. Okay, so there is an optional lecture, like the last 30 minutes is optional. You could leave if you feel like incredibly tired. And basically, in case this wasn't apparent, not apparent, I'm pretty sure I didn't say this last week, but the way we do check-ins is through a check-in code that is randomly done during class. And to check in, all you have to do is make sure you're logged in, go to the Rails Decal website, and let's see, go railsdecal.com. I hope, so sometimes it slows down when like a bunch of people are on it. You'll see under our view material, there's a check-in, right? And all you have to do is type in the code, which is, our code is basic routing. And I'll turn off the check-in code in about like 5 to 10 minutes. So you probably want to do that now. The optional lecture is gonna be on HTML and CSS. And it's the only front end we'll really get into within the scope of this class. And if you want to get more into that, there's always the web design decal, which is a great decal. But if you staying for this, will probably help you on your homework. So yeah. Okay.
Are you guys helping right now, or are you?
Are you auditing? Okay, yeah, then you should probably check in.
I was waiting to sit, but if you
Okay,
get
it's okay.
accepted.
Just deal
Yeah.
with like in like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's up? No, I did not have them today. Hey,
Uh,
what's up, Alma?
Alright, everybody, can I get your attention again? Our TA Warren's gonna do a lecture on HTML, CSS, like I said earlier, which will be helpful for the homework. But if you want to bounce, feel free to bounce. You already have the check-in code. For those who have questions about anything that's like setting up or enrolling in the class, I'll answer your questions right outside the door, so we don't mess with the lecture. Thank you. I'm plugging this. Yeah. I'm also turning off the check-in code right now.
Sure, everybody.